There's this weird perception amongst lawyers that if we give our clients some advice about risk and they decide to ignore us, that they're idiots and they should just make better decisions. And I don't think that's right. Let's take a look at risk and what our job really is. This is Chris Hargraves, and this is the Tips for Lawyers podcast. Welcome. When you decide that you love the podcast, I'd love it if you would go to tipsforlawyers.com/iTunes. That'll take you to the iTunes page. Leave a review, leave a 5-star ranking, say something nice, and we're going to get into talking about risk right now. Lawyers are fundamentally quite risk averse. We don't like doing anything that is going to expose us to risk. That is why, when given the task of writing an advice to a client, we actually tend towards not writing an advice. The advice would actually take a paragraph, but we write 16 pages because we are risk averse, and our risk aversion says, we better not send a letter out unless we list out every single document that the client gave us, because what if they forgot to give us one and it comes back to bite us later? And I understand that risk. I think it makes for bad letter writing, and I've spoken about that before. However, let's just stop for a second and bear in mind that that is our risk. Now, what is our job for our clients? So let's say you've been given a draft contract. You've got a contract review to do, which I know is everyone's favorite task in the law. And you have to go through 67 pages by tomorrow because it's, open quote, urgent, close quote, and the client may or may not then look at it for 3 weeks after you bust a gut to get it done. What is actually our job? Of course, at the outset, our job is to go through the contract, identify critical meanings, definitions, and issues that we see based on our experience and our expertise. We might then choose to triage some of those issues into red, yellow, and green, say high risk, medium risk, low risk issues. And that might then help the client to make a decision. But it is not our job to say to our client, you should or should not sign this contract unless. Think about the distinction there for a moment. Our client is a business person. It is our client's job to make decisions based on our advice, having regard to how much and what kinds of risk they are prepared to accept as they move forward with their particular business venture or this particular part of it. That is their job. Our job is to flag the risks for them and let them know our opinion about how important they are based on what might go wrong in the future. Now, of course, contextually, at the start of a deal, most clients just want to get on with the work, get paid, and get out, and they don't like talking about the what-ifs and the just-in-cases. And so part of our job is sometimes to give a few just-in-cases, maybe tell a war story about when something went horrifically wrong and how it could have all been solved if only they'd amended Clause 2.4, subsection D, to say what we said it should have said. But the client, being made aware of that, might still decide to go ahead. And at that point, we might think, oh, gee, they're not very smart, are they? They just asked for our advice, they paid for it, and then they ignored everything we said. Well, that's probably not what they've done. They have weighed what we said against the risks and benefits of the deal, and they have decided to proceed nonetheless. And I think those are two very different perspectives, because we can never tell a client whether they should or should not do something. That is not our job as a general rule. We can say what we would do in a given circumstance, but often that's going to be poor advice because lawyers have a tendency to be poor business people. The reason we're poor business people, ironically enough, is because we're so risk averse. We are generally not prepared to take the necessary risks in order to achieve the kinds of results that we might like to see. But we do have a tendency to get a little bit judgy of our clients who are prepared to take more risks than us. And at the end of the day, I think that's a very poor attitude to take to our own clients. And I also think it's a poor attitude to take in circumstances where we are not necessarily correct. There are any number of cases in history where people have done things that were illegal, or they have done things that were ill-advised but that have ultimately resulted in worldwide changes. Think of people sitting in seats of buses that they shouldn't have due to the colour of their skin. Think about people deciding to go to a courthouse to vote. Think about people travelling in a bus that they ought not be travelling in with people who might be black or white. Some of these things were incredibly dangerous. Some of these things were incredibly ill-advised if those people had been risk-averse, but there was a bigger picture that they were prepared to accept was more important than the risks associated with the decision. Now, of course, those things relate to civil liberties and general world-breaking changes that needed to take place, but on a more small and economic scale, these things happen every day. When Steve Jobs took over Apple, he decided to kill most of the products that Apple created. He really reduced it right back to 4, essentially. And that was a huge decision to make. That was a huge risk to take. But he did it anyway because he saw that there was a potential for a greater return at the end of the day. And this is what our clients are doing. Beyond that, though, I want you to consider this. Not just what is our job, but why is our mindset necessarily more correct than that of someone else? It is true that our job is about risk, but we need to have a healthy relationship with risk, not an unhealthy anxiety or fear of risk. Risk exists in everything that we do, and our job is not to avoid it in all circumstances. As we go through life, we are going to face many risks. The risk of people saying no to us, the risk of people rejecting us, the risk of people firing us, the risk of people not paying our bills. We're going to have a lot of risks. But some of them we're going to decide are worthwhile undertaking. And so I think as part of our desire to make a greater human connection, we also need to have a greater appreciation for the role that risk has as we advise our clients on their personal and their business affairs. The decisions that they make, if they have weighed up our advice and decided to go down a particular path, then so be it. Provided that path is not unlawful or unethical, your job is to assist them in the achievement of their goals. That is all I had to say about risk today. Some thoughts had occurred to me. I thought I would record them either for your benefit or at the very least to give you some background noise while you did something else on the bus. This has been the Tips for Lawyers podcast. Head over to tipsforlawyers.com/iTunes. Leave a ranking, leave a review. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.